Hi everyone, Lexi here. When you all started praising the demo of Digimon Story Time Stranger, you piqued my interest. I'm ready to admit that I was hesitant to try it. My last brush with Digimon Story was Cyber Sleuth, and while I pushed pretty far into that game, the repetitive combat wore me down. Boss fights had their moments, sure, but the constant grind of Digivolutions and Digidevolutions left me exhausted and left my interest in its story waning. That's why Digimon Story Time Stranger's demo caught me off guard. Instead of easing me back into the usual gameplay loop, it opened with a shockingly apocalyptic setup. You're an agent, tasked with preventing a catastrophic calamity while the world teeters on the brink of war between Digimon, a scenario far bleaker than what you'd usually expect from the series. The mention of the war even reminded me of Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, and the patina of a high-rise building you had to scale evoked the same color palette as Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne. For Digimon, this felt bold, even refreshing. The story pushed forward with momentum, carrying me right up to a fateful twist that sent my character into the past. And just when things were getting interesting, the demo ended, teasing all the possibilities that lay ahead. At that point, I thought to myself, maybe this could be the Digimon game that I'll finally enjoy. But when I picked up from the demo and jumped into the full game, the urgency of that calamity all but evaporated. The apocalyptic threat was still technically there, but the mood shifted into something far lighter, something familiar and safer. The promise of the demo gave way to the routine I remembered from playing Cyber Sleuth, and in that moment, I felt my excitement slowly slipping away. All I could do was sigh and think, uh-oh. To be fair, this combat exhaustion didn't hit me right away. In fact, I really enjoyed it at first. Time Stranger's combat was relatively quick, allowing you to auto-battle, crank up the battle speed, and swap Digimon in and out of the backline with ease. The UI also helps a ton by showing only what mattered. When you picked an ability, you'd see if its affinity had a known weakness or still needed to be discovered. That clarity allows you to hone in on one piece of information rather than other superfluous weaknesses not applicable to the chosen ability. And tying it all together were the sound effects. Each strike in combat landed with the sharp impact of an action game. Out on the field, those same effects carried over when you sent Digimon to smash obstacles or ambush enemies, sometimes even one-shotting weaker ones and scooping up rewards instantly.
Good.
This made exploration feel unique in a way that married the action on the field with the visceral feeling of combat, and this is all just because of the sound effects, mind you. But about 4 or 5 hours in, that spark dulled. The novelty of those systems started to wear off and battles blurred together. There were still occasional surprises, but they didn't come nearly as often as in the opening hours. What the combat ultimately settled into were the same encounters against slightly different groups of enemies, with little real danger to my party. Before long, I leaned onto auto-battle for most encounters, and only took control for bosses. At that point, it almost felt like an auto-battler. Almost. And if you're thinking turning up the difficulty might fix that, it doesn't. All hard mode really does is make enemies tankier and stretch out fights. And in a game where grinding is already central to evolving and improving your team, dragging out battles doesn't make them more exciting. It just makes the gameplay loop slower. And nowhere is that more obvious than in boss fights. Even when I was landing attacks that dealt 300% damage, it barely shaved off a sliver of their health bar. Now imagine that same fight on hard mode. That, I feel, is the fundamental issue with the combat system. While the new quality of life features are excellent, the core is still the same as Cyber Sleuth, warts and all. And the sad part is that most boss battles lean on repeating the same patterns over and over, turning what should be tense encounters into tests of endurance rather than strategy. I suspect a reason why the combat is designed this way comes down to the real focus of Time Stranger. And to its credit, this is where the game shines. Digimon aren't locked into one straight path forward. Instead, you can digivolve them up to stronger forms, or even digidevolve them back down to reroute their growth. On top of that, a single Digimon can branch into multiple possible evolutions depending on its stats or conditions. What really deepens the system are the agent perks, which are skill trees you unlock as you progress. They're tied to personality. Each personality is grouped together under a corresponding perk tree, and any Digimon with that personality can use the perks you've unlocked there. It took me a while to wrap my head around it, but once it clicked, it made sense. Beyond the elemental traits each Digimon innately has, these perks let wildly different monsters behave similarly if they share a personality, so you can shape roles across species without being locked into a single evolution path. That's where the true beauty of Time Stranger lies. Even if the combat loop feels repetitive, the freedom to experiment with evolutions and perks encourages creativity, and that flexibility feels true to the spirit of Digimon. It's a pretty neat concept, and easily the most satisfying part of the whole experience. The story itself is where the cracks really start to show. After the demo's dramatic setup, you'd expect the narrative to escalate, but instead, it slows to a crawl. The apocalyptic threat is still mentioned, but it rarely feels like it's driving the plot forward. Instead, the game leans on a formula that quickly becomes familiar. Head to a new area, meet a set of characters, dive into a dungeon, and wrap things up. It's the same rhythm that carried Cyber Sleuth, and while it works in short bursts, stretched over a dozen of hours, it starts to feel routine. The first 4 hours are bogged down by tutorial after tutorial, and even the story scenes get in their own way. In one mission, you're chasing a Digimon down to a dungeon with a content creator at your side. The problem is that every time you catch up, the Digimon just runs away again, but not before the game halts everything so she can deliver commentary.
The creature was startled by the noise and ran off. The chase continues. The mysterious creature is escaping. It seems to be injured, so I'd like to try to help it.
Wasn't this supposed to be urgent? Instead, the tension evaporates. It's a small set of scenes, but it highlights the kind of questionable storytelling that dragged the game's pacing down. Visually, there's also a tonal disconnect. The demo's darker, moodier atmosphere gives way to brighter and safer environments, which clash with the urgency the opening hours worked so hard to establish. The shift doesn't ruin the presentation. The game still has charm, but it makes the story feel less cohesive, like it promised one kind of Digimon tale only to deliver another. That said, the character designs are a real highlight. They're the work of Suzuhito Yasuda, the same artist behind the Devil Survivor series and the manga Durarara, and they instantly make the cast of Time Stranger stand out, even compared to Cyber Sleuth. It's a shame that the English dub doesn't carry the same spark. It's serviceable, but nothing about it stands out as remarkable or memorable.
Naturally, we won't send you out defenseless. I'll transmit some firepower to you right now.
All that said, one of the reasons I revisit games or series I didn't connect with the first time is because perspectives shift as people grow. What felt flat or uninteresting years ago might click differently later on. And through that change, I can start to understand what longtime fans already see in it. That's why Time Stranger's demo was so exciting. It hinted at a bolder, more apocalyptic take on Digimon that I thought might finally help me see the series through a new lens. But the full game never followed through. The urgency and cohesion I expected faded quickly, replaced by something safe and familiar. And that's where my frustration comes in. Because saying quote-unquote it's for the fans doesn't actually explain why fans love it, nor does it help newcomers connect. I always root for games to push themselves, to grow beyond what's safe and expected. With Digimon Story Time Stranger, we only got to see a glimpse of that in the demo. It's just too bad that that's all it was.